All right, so good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining me. I'm calling this meeting of the advisory committee to order because the capital improvement planning committee to order. And the reason for tonight's meeting is more of a discussion about process more than it is specifics. And I apologize for not being there in person, but out of abundance of caution, I was exposed to coronavirus the past few days, and I'm trying to keep everybody healthy. So that's the step I'm taking just to do that. That's why I'm joining you remotely tonight. So we do have a couple things on the agenda for discussion, and right off the bat, we do have a series of minutes. George, do you have the minutes, correct? You had the minutes?
I gave them up to Katie a number of weeks back. I don't know whether she's pushed them forward. Did she just? Okay, all right.
You pushed them. Okay. So does everybody have the minutes in front of them right now? Unfortunately, I do not because I'm here remotely. So I should, unless, hold on one second. I can actually look at those.
Katie sent them out today, I think. Katie sent them out.
You got it?
She emailed them out earlier today.
Does anybody have them? Chris, do you have those?
Yes, I have them.
Okay. So you want to just go through them one by one, and somebody make a motion a motion to approve?
Yep. Make a motion to approve the capital minutes from Saturday, March 6th, 2021.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that with just the typo with the misspelling of ambulances.
That was me.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. All right. Any questions or discussion? We got all those in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And so we have to do this remote. We have to do this by individual, right? So I'll start with you, Chris.
Aye.
You, Amy.
Aye.
And you and who's that? I'm sorry. That's
It's Stephanie there.
Steph. I'm sorry. Steph, go ahead.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't
Okay.
part of these meetings.
All right. All right. And who else are we missing?
Paul is on.
Paul is on too. He has to abstain too.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So I'll vote aye because I was present. So we do have a majority here. So okay. So all those in favor, so that we do pass those. You have the second set there, Chris?
I make a motion to approve the capital minutes from Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So it'll be Chris, okay? Steph? I know Steph's gonna have to stay. Amy?
Aye.
And you're gonna abstain, Steph, and
Abstain,
you
yeah.
as well, Paul, right? Okay, I'll vote aye, so they pass 302. All right, and there's one more set, I believe, right, Chris?
Yep, the third set. Make a motion to approve the capital minutes from Wednesday, June 30th, 2021.
I'll second that.
All right. Any questions, comments? All right, on a roll call, Chris?
Aye.
Amy,
Amy?
aye.
Stephanie abstained.
Steph? I'm sorry. Paul? Abstain? All right, and I'll vote aye. The chair will vote aye. All right. So let's move on to the main agenda tonight. And during the past year or so, there's been quite a bit of discussion about different projects that we need to focus on next. Since we just completed the borough school, there's always several other big projects that we need to look at building-wise. And to my knowledge, there's at least 3, possibly 4 buildings that we're currently looking at. The first in that line is, and this is not in any descending or ascending order. The Taylor School is comes to mind. And that may be several years out, but certainly the process to begin that discussion should be soon. I know that the SBA process takes quite a while, so obviously that discussion has to happen a few times before we even get in line for that. The second is the community center discussion, and we've already gone through a study, a feasibility study for that, and that's hanging out there right now for possible consideration. The Public Works building needs renovation. It's been under consideration for a few times before the committee. And then one which I nearly forgot the other night, but it has been discussed a few times now, is a fire substation, for which we have land that was given to the town by the state a couple of years back for consideration along Route 140 and near 95. So those are 4 major projects that I can think of that fall into the building category. And then the other ones, other things that come into play are sort of capital needs for roads, for dams, for sidewalks, for subsurface water treatment. We've got water and sewer, of course, which has its own dedicated revenue source, which is less of an issue at this point in time. We've already spent a lot of money in that direction already. And then we also have, any kind of any fields or field improvements that we want to look at as well. So those are the categories that I can think of. And then I'll open it up for discussion for other members of the committee to talk about other things that we should be looking at as well. And then we'll talk about what kind of a process we should be looking at for doing that. So I'll open it up for discussion now. Anybody on the committee have any further thoughts about or anyone from the audience have any further thoughts about what we should be looking at in addition?
I mean, I
So
think, Bill, I
Go
think
ahead,
kind of
Chris.
hit on most of the major ones. Obviously fleet replacement on the vehicle side of things between, DPW. I know police has theirs in their capital outlay. Fire tends to use their ambulance receipts, but that's always a consideration too. School buses, DPW, senior center, which Mark's been great at getting grants for their vehicle replacement. Roads and sidewalks. Sidewalks have not been touched, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 in the 8 years I've been here, and clearly prior to that. So starting to look at sidewalks and have that discussion. Stormwater, the dams, our stormwater management are big ones as well, like you mentioned. And then there's some of the other things that the school has. Fields in particular. I know the turf field is getting close to due for a turf replacement within the next 5+ years anyway. So as part of the 5 to 10 year discussion, that's on the docket. And then, other things like band equipment that's been pushed off. Seeing these things go 30+ years without getting attention is tough to bring back to the residents every year, but it's always a tight crunch. So I guess that's kind of why we're here tonight, to figure out how we get into and address these outstanding issues that we have.
Okay. Anyone else for the discussion, or any other ideas or thoughts that we should be looking at?
I think one other one at the high school that has come up because of the turf field and the complex there is the expansion of the locker room to be able to have football locker rooms, which we obviously don't. We use the IGO for just our teams, but we don't have a place for visiting teams. And obviously the IGO is not an ideal location. It's an elementary school to have high school level kids in the building on a regular basis. So again, it would be an extension of the existing locker rooms, but it's something that should be considered in the future as well.
Yeah, because I think we've spent all that money on that beautiful field, and I believe, I've seen people ask, well, why doesn't the football team play there? Of course, people don't know. I'm pretty sure that you have to have a spot for the visiting team, so that's why they're at the Ahern. It's not that they don't want to play there, but you just can't. I don't even think we could fit our team in the existing locker rooms. Never mind a visiting team. And quick question, Bill. I was just trying to think what year and stuff. Are we that far out, at least 5 years out to replace the turf, or are we a little closer?
Yeah, I would say, they typically say that the fields are good for 10 years, but, and that field has been in there now for 6, maybe 6.5.
I was trying to think of when it.
But I will also say that the maintenance that's been being done on it on a regular basis, and the group that we've been bringing in to help us supplement our abilities, the turf field actually is in excellent shape right now. So I would really hope that we could get at least 5 years, maybe be pushing, closer to 12 years on life out of it.
That's great.
If we continue the
great.
maintenance the way we have, which I think is the intention, so
I think the fact that the high school football team has not been using it
it's helpful.
is helpful.
Yeah. I mean, they do practice on it,
Right.
and they'll use it because obviously they have to play on other turf fields, so they want to get used to it. And it's also the first field that's available in the springtime, so it does get some use, but nothing compared to what it would if it was the full-time field. So that
Right.
has helped, you're right.
So are there any games at all played on, any football games at all played on that field, Bill, or is it just strictly all the football games are played at the Ahern?
All the varsity and JV are played at the Ahern. I think they have maybe played some freshmen in JV at the high school, but I'm not positive of that, to be honest with you.
During our shortfall 2 season last year, we played on the turf.
Yeah.
Right.
But every other sport, we have locker rooms for the soccer teams and for everybody else to survive. They're obviously smaller teams and easier to manage than the large football teams, which take, much larger locker rooms. And the high school was never built or designed to have those locker rooms.
Okay. So one thing that I asked Marie to take a look at the existing 5-year plan, which I think she provided to each of you as considerations. And I'm just going to pull that up for a second here. And if we take a look at that,
Once we get to here.
the current plan is we're now fiscal 2022. And I know that we weren't able to fund all the things in fiscal 22 that we were asking for. The DPW renovation study was never done. We are working on let's start from the beginning. We are doing the street reconstruction piece. We did get the 650,000, Chris, was that a little shy of that number? I think it was a little bit
Yeah,
less
for
than
the
that, right?
roadway maintenance, the chapter 90, we came in at 623.
Okay. So that was a little bit short of that. The West Street Dam conversion, dam culvert, that's going out to bid now in the spring, so it's actually being pushed to 23. Well, will be construction season 23, but not fiscal 23 at this point. And then the facility study, we held on that, correct?
Correct. That has not been done.
All right, not been done. The street sweeper, we did pay for $51,230. The lawnmowers, I don't believe we pay for that?
We did one lawnmower. We did 30,000 for one mower.
Okay, all right. The two 6-wheel dumps we did not do. The 5-ton body slide-in sander we did not do, right?
Correct. That did not get done.
Anything on that list that we did do?
Nope.
For the remaining list?
Just the
they're all-
lawnmower. That was the only equipment vehicle that we got.
Okay. So we kind of a limited, we had sort of a limited plan this past year. We did do the buses. The technology networking we did. Office copiers we did. And I think the music band equipment we did as well, Bill?
No, we didn't do it through CIP. We actually used leftover budget money at the end of the year, but with CIP approval.
Okay, great. So, but it was finished. The project was completed.
Yeah.
So, all right. Water is, we're not listed here on this particular plan that I'm looking at. But let's take a look at the 22 through 26. So looking at the 5-year capital plan, assumed funding, the vehicles and equipment, they're looking at, there's another, so a lot of these things will get carried over into the next year, right?
Yeah, we
So
did
we're
not
looking
we didn't
at-
do any capital on water and sewer. We had the bond from the prior fiscal year for our projects we were working on with that funding. We didn't do any vehicles this current fiscal year.
And what about the excavator, Chris?
We did not do that either this fiscal year.
Okay, all right. So FY '23, we haven't really downloaded those plans yet, but there are a number of things that we'll take a look at. You know, and below is the funding, potential funding for that, that we can look to. We do think that we're in better shape this year because we are getting meals tax money in. So we will get some additional help on that area. The water receipts bonding, and if there's anything there that we need to be doing, that's all set aside as well. And retained earnings from water as well that we can look at. So I do think that, I think the next thing we want to pay attention to though is, and we'll talk about the free cash position in a few minutes, but let's take a look at where the bond schedule is right now, because I think this is really a key to what our potential opportunities are for slotting in projects over the next several years. And if you take a look at the FY22 schedule of outstanding bonds, it looks like the window opens up a little bit in, if you're taking a look strictly at the general obligation bond side of things start to drop off. We see a window open up really in fiscal 26 for about $300, I'd say about $250,000, I think, from this year, from 23 to 26. And then you've got, and then beyond that, another window opens up again, another significant window opens up again at 30, where it drops off pretty significantly. We lose another 300,000 so at that point. So there are $300,000 bond issuances that we can look at that are significant potential payments. We can start slotting in some payments at that point. So I'm going to let Marie and George speak to this at this point. If you have any further thoughts on this.
All right, I'll do it. I don't know whether she's on the machine or not here or whatever. I don't see it. One of the things.
Yeah, she was on.
Is she there?
Yeah, I think she's on. Yeah, I believe she's on.
Okay. One of the things that you and I talked about a couple of days back is the potential for, okay, these things are dropping off, but if you don't make a plan for recapturing the money while it's there, then what happens is, if let's say you take off 500,000, then what you do is you're just budgeting up to whatever was there, and you've lost the money unless you do it all. Like when it drops off 500, you get something right in that year. So probably moving forward, what you want to do is take like whatever is dropping off, and in that same year, either fund it by putting it into like a capital stabilization or a specific stabilization you created for, projects. And then if it takes 5 years for the next thing to come, it's not like you've got to make up the difference because you're funding it every year anyway.
Right.
I don't know whether I said that so people understand it, but you know what I'm saying, Bill, and I hope everybody.
I do.
I see Bill shaking his head, so I hope you're.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I think to George's point, to your point that you earlier made for FY26, we're going to go from a current debt and interest on the general side of 3.4 million, almost 3.5 million, and in FY26 it's going to drop down to 2.6 million. The next 3 years are very close to the same, only by a little bit, but it's that FY26 when we drop off the public safety building, the high school gas conversion, the land acquisition, and the Hearn renovation. When those projects all drop off, that all of a sudden you've got about an $800,000, $750,000 difference. And to George's point, if you immediately put that into capital stabilization or Conversely, if you have a project that's coming forward, that's when that project can start the funding on it. And as we all know, the way debt works, it's actually the year after you incur the debt that you start making the payments. So what that tells you is basically in FY '25, any one of those projects you originally named could be in the process to start and have almost $700,000 a year. And to give you an idea of how much that really could bond, the current borough project, which is one of the biggest ones that we have on the books, is costing us on principal side about $500,000 a year, and on the interest side, another $400,000. So it's $900,000, and that's a 30-some-odd million dollar project. So that shows you $750,000 can really cover quite a bit of debt in buildings. So I think that's, to your point, that's where you're looking at FY '25 at the earliest to start a fairly good-sized project to fill the gaps. Or more.
But I think if we're going to do something about that, we need to have those conversations now, obviously. And I think that if we're going to do anything, then we should start planning for those things now. And I do think that my concern is what George said, is that we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're building capacity into the budget, and we don't want to be stealing from bond debt service and rolling it into the operating budget to then create a situation where we're now all of a sudden going to be whacked with a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 payment that was absorbed into the operating budget. So, I think what we want to do is start planning now to start tucking some of that money away as things start to roll off. But I'd be curious to get the rest of the committee's opinion on that, thoughts on that.
But also that's really a $17 million project for the bond.
Right, the bond.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because that sounds like a lot of money, but it was really only 17 that we were picking up.
Right. So, and I think, we'll start getting into the actual projects to see what we're looking at cost-wise. But there are different things that we can look at to maybe pay for some of these projects and maybe come up with some creative financing to help with those. But I think it starts with the debt service to see where we stand. And so the key thing is that we could always add more debt if we needed to, because I think our debt service is actually relatively low in comparison to many of similarly sized communities. I think George, you had indicated that in East Bridgewater, we're like about half of what you guys have over there, and that's about, and you're just a little bit bigger than we were.
No,
So,
we were smaller than you. We were about 55 million to your 85, or to Foxborough's 85. I should say.
For 55, you mean 55?
55 million East Bridgewater. Foxborough is 85 million, but we had way more debt than what you're carrying in the town of Foxborough.
Right. So I think the key is that we want to make sure that we're maintaining a relatively good position debt-wise, and if we can, and the key is if we can try and smooth it out so it doesn't look like we're really impacting the community in any way, shape, or form. I mean, that's the key, so that we don't, it's not, creating additional expenses that people will be concerned with. And, we've done the last two projects within the levy, which is to the town's credit, of course. And I think to the extent that we can try and do that as well moving forward, I think that's also beneficial for the community, so we don't end up with additional debt service, debt payments for the residents to start paying additional taxes for. Bill, any thoughts about the needs at the Taylor School, and what are you looking at? What that would start looking like in terms of improvements on that building?
Yeah, as I said to the school committee, and I think I may have said in front of the Board of Selectmen at one point, it's the last of the renovation projects for all of the buildings that haven't been done. It would be very similar to in my mind, at least to the Borough project from a scope point of view. We have some advantages there where we have put in a new heating plant, and we've done some energy saving things that would come forward, but the basis of the building is really a gut reno, just like was done at the borough. So, but to that point, and we've talked to the MSBA already, if we were to even put in a statement of interest this year, we know last time it took 3 years worth of putting in statements of interest before they finally accepted into the project. So it really was a 5-year cycle before we actually got to break ground. So that means, even if we start the process today, the town's probably not looking at doing anything with the borough project realistically until about FY '27.
You mean the Taylor?
The Taylor project, yeah.
Right.
So I think that's a reality, but, and at that point, obviously, there's going to be cost creep between what the borough is and what that school is, just as materials continue to go up and contract pricing goes up.
I agree. So, and then in FY, it's probably in the first payment wouldn't be due till FY '28 anyway. So, so it's really probably another 5 to 6 years out. So, as far as the DPW facility, Chris, have you any preliminary indications of what that's looking like?
I have not. I've asked a couple of years now. A couple of years ago, it was a $30,000 feasibility study assessment on the existing building to see what we could renovate it for. Just in the 2 years that we've been asking, that study is now, a $50,000 study.
Right.
That building is 50 plus years old, 53, 54 years old now, and has not been touched. We can hopefully use the shell of the building. It's a, concrete block structure. Most of it, 2/3 of it is really just storage, but we do have quite the extensive equipment maintenance group in there. We have 4 mechanics in there. We deal with all of the school buses, police vehicles, DPW, and then the ancillary senior center inspections vehicles. So that's probably where the bulk of that money's going to go. We also need, at the same time, to meet our stormwater management regulations, should have an indoor wash bay for the vehicles. That's something that's required for our MS4 permit, and we don't have one available. So that washing structure should be tied into the sewer system, which we don't have space for right now in the existing building. So, we are looking at some expansion, but in reality, it's a full reno. We don't have we have a small locker room for the staff to change in, but there's no showers, there's no real wash-up facilities for them. There's a lot of OSHA regulations now that have come into play since Mass DLS has accepted all OSHA regulations. So I wish I could put a number on it, but at this point, I think originally we had talked, $500,000 per bay of that garage. So we were looking at probably $1.5 million, but with some expansion and just where inflation has gone in the last 2 years, we're probably $2 to $3 million if I had to put a rough guess on it.
Okay. And then the one other big project there's 2 other big projects, of course, but I think the other big one that's come to mind is the community center discussion, and that study reveals somewhere in order of size of building somewhere about $11 to $12 million expense for that kind of facility as well. So you add that on, that's so then it starts to climb. The numbers start to climb. But I think it's for us to start. I think the first order of business is to really get a good handle on what the costs are, and then put an inflation factor on them for several years out to see what we're looking at, and then build a financing plan around that. And if we phase it in, how will that work in comparison to our bond schedule? The other project that I mentioned earlier was the fire substation, which has been asked for several times from the fire department, and given the fact that it depends upon how much expansion occurs up on Route 1, because if that continues to expand up there, it's going to continue to draw resources away from the existing public safety facility, and we constantly get drawn up onto 95 and then in some of our border communities to assist with responding to the various calls as they do for us as well. So, our response situation is more difficult and it's stretched at that point. If we're responding to Route 1, they have to respond to Route 95, say off of Route 140. So it does create more of a response lag time. So they're all legitimate needs and wants, and I think that's something that we should start dealing with realistically. We add on that the additional things such as the sidewalk program, which we should be doing. Chris and I talked about that as far as once we are done with the road project, we should be at a point now where we should start focusing a little bit more attention on sidewalks as opposed to roads. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Chris, as to where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, we have in the last 10 years managed to touch 80% of the roadways in town with some sort of surface treatment. So whether it's a mill and pave, an overlay, cape seal, rubber cape seal, you know, some of these pavement preservation techniques, you know, extend the life of the road. You know, some of them are spec'd at 5 to 7 years. We're getting, you know, 8+ out of some of those projects now. You know, a mill and pave is, you know, probably 12 to 15 years. So we're at a point where, you know, just before COVID hit, we were looking at the Chapter 90 funding that we get plus the meals tax money that we were getting, and we were looking at starting to phase in those sidewalk projects. We have, you know, the prioritization plan for our Complete Streets program. So we were looking at starting to phase those in, and then COVID hit and took, you know, that extra $150,000, $200,000, you know, kind of out of that program. So, you know, we're looking at how we start to phase those back in. You know, when that meals tax money comes back to the roadways, we can start doing that. You know, but we're looking at the West Street Dam project. We did get a grant for it. We did get, you know, $700,000 for that project. But we were looking at probably $250,000 from the town side, and instead of taking it out of the reserves, free cash for capital, we were going to use our Chapter 90 fund for it. So anytime we do a bigger project like that, it just takes away from that ongoing maintenance and renovation of streets and sidewalks. So it is something we need to continue that. As soon as we stop putting money towards the streets every year, we're going to be back in a spot where we were 10 years ago, and our road rating's going to drop from what we've built. So
I think, well, thank you for that, Chris. The other thing that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact is because Foxborough has done a pretty good job of planning financially for the future. It looks like right now that our OPEB and debt and pension payments will be fully met by 2030 at this point in time, somewhere in that area. So if we were to reduce that payment, that obligation away, now you're talking some serious money, because now you're looking at, you know, a $3 to $4 million commitment that we would then be able to use towards, you know, our availability, rather, available for our capital needs. So, and maybe Marie, can you address that for us, or George, can you address that issue?
Well, first of all, you just mentioned I was going to address that, is that you mentioned the OPEB, and there was an actuarial study done.
Right.
Just keep in mind, the actuarial study was done prior to the fall town meeting where we did the $900 or $1 million and caught up one of the payments. And then the plan is, I think, going ahead is try to recapture the one for this year too, before the end of the year. So I think that's even going to accelerate further. But getting to your point about when these things fall off, like meaning the OPEB and the other, if you do it, what is it, the county,
the pension obligation.
yeah. If you play it right, it frees up a bunch of money, and then again, if you don't have a project right at that moment in time, you're putting it into like a capital projects stabilization fund and maintaining it, then you can begin doing some real major projects and have the money backing it. Yes, I agree with you.
So Bill or George, that's a significant improvement in one of the plans, right? I think one of them was going to balance out around 2034.
Oh, yeah, it's a couple of years earlier now. But
That's a
without
big
the
change,
million that
okay.
we just did.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so that's
Yeah,
probably better.
32 was the year that we were
32
told,
and
like, the last, like, 4 or 5 years was
Yeah.
the goal.
Right, so,
I think the pension was 32, and I think the OPEB was 34.
yeah,
But the issue with that is that the reason it's gotten reduced is obviously we've had a great stock market.
Yeah.
So keep in the back of your mind that you have a down year in the stock market, it's going to negatively impact what those funds are, because that's obviously how they're growing. They're growing based on investments. So it's great until it's questionable until you actually get it fully funded. And once you get it fully funded, then you're somewhat in good shape, so.
Right.
The other thing too is Chris is talking about sidewalks. I've had a couple of people complain about some of the sidewalks in town on South Street. And I know we're a little ways away. I don't know when that new Moore Street project will end up in front of Zoning Board of Appeals, but the complaint was not just because it's a sidewalk that children are used to get to the schools. And so, I think it's, what is it, within a mile that you don't qualify for the bus, unless it's the kindergartners, or, there's certain things, but, we're asking our children to walk to school, and, just something for Chris to juggle with his big list, but I would love to see somewhere for the sidewalks to come into play, just because some of them are really in poor shape right now, and if that project goes through on Moore Street, there is no sidewalk, and those, I believe they're gonna be within that are they gonna be in that mile to have to walk, or are they just outside of that mile?
I think they're just outside, because they're
Just
almost on the
outside.
Mansfield line,
Okay,
so.
but anyhow, I mean, the sidewalks, I've had a couple of people bring up sidewalks. So just to throw that in your lap, Chris, with the rest of it, but yeah, I mean, there are certain, I think maybe, like everything, I guess it's just gonna have to be prioritized.
Right, so I think that's the part of is really the question mark is how do we start prioritizing some of these things? And also I think having a plan to prioritize things, even you can do even further prioritization of things like sidewalks and roads. I mean, we've come up with a process for doing prioritization for roads by using a street rating program. We probably should do the same thing for sidewalks. And I would think that would take into consideration areas around schools and how they get prioritized first before areas and sidewalks in other areas. And I think, Chris, you probably could have that conversation with your current engineering crew that are doing that, and see if in fact they could do such a study for us in that area.
Yeah, and
Plus that will take money too,
yeah,
as well.
we've started. We do have, in all the things that we're regulated to do. One of them is an ADA transition plan, where we have to look at all of our sidewalks in town at every intersection, see what is ADA compliant, what is not. So we have that plan. We just started, if you noticed, this past summer on South Street, using our internal forces highway department to, fix a lot of those impassable areas, putting in the detection panel and actually making them meet all the ADA requirements for slope and percentage. So we've already started looking at that, from all the regulations that we're required to meet. And we are, can definitely look at a sidewalk maintenance plan, similar to the pavement management plan, to do a rating system. And then we need to get into the conversation of where do we replace sidewalks? Where do we remove them and just put back grass, just loam and seed? A lot of these neighborhoods that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that had sidewalks put in, they had sidewalks put in on both sides of the street. They're residential neighborhoods that the people that are driving on those roads live there. Do they need sidewalks on both sides of the street anymore? Planning board doesn't require it anymore. So it's a lot cheaper for us to rip out asphalt and put back loom and seed than it is to build a brand new sidewalk. So that's kind of another conversation that, whether it's through this or the Board of Selectmen, needs to be a discussion as well, as far as what those, again, priorities are, moving forward.
Yeah,
But we can at least
the real
reach
debate's
out
gonna
and,
be which side do you pull it off of?
Huh?
Which side gets done versus the other one, so anyways. So I think what we want to try and do is come up with a process of identifying I think we've identified most of the major issues, and then also do the, that's my granddaughter yelling in the background, sorry about that. So we are at the point now where we really start rating some of these projects and then determining which ones go first. And so what kind of a process are we going to do that? So, and what kind of a process? So I think probably we do internally, we start come up with that process. So I think it's really important that we come up with some level of consideration, what that looks like. And because we haven't really done that here. I don't think we've really come up with that process over time, is to really taking all these projects, putting them on the table, and then start rating them and see which one comes first. Because they're all important. The question is which one gets done first and which one gets the funding mechanism in that respect. And so, any thoughts on that?
Just a quick question from me, Bill, because I'm new to the process. So a lot of these, I'll keep talking. A lot of these projects are very discrete. Like it's a building here or some vehicles here, and then we talk about the roads and it's kind of abstract. How do we come up with a list of roads, or how does that work? Typically, maybe that's a Chris question. And sidewalks.
yeah, I think what we've done is, when the previous director, when Roger was here, he brought in an engineering firm. We did a pavement management plan. They ranked all the roadways with recommendations on treatments for them. I will say we pushed the envelope on what those recommendations were, just to make sure we got to as many roads as quickly as we could. We just did an update this past winter. So a year ago, we did an update on that pavement management plan. And we can, using that, figure out how much money we have, what we have for funding on an annual basis, and put a 3-year plan together or a 5-year plan together, and go based on those recommendations. It's what people need to understand. It's not always the worst road first, because sometimes the worst road costs the most money. And when you're trying to spread it out and get as much coverage as you can, you're not going to get to that worst road first. The other thing that we have been doing is looking at and working as a DPW or Public Works with the water department to figure out what water projects are coming up, so that we're not paving a road, only have to dig it up 2 years later for a water main project, which a lot of towns that don't talk internally with the DPW, have that problem. As you'll see on North Street, just a quick plug, North Street was done intentionally that way. There was half of that road had an old gas main that was settling out and needed to be fixed. But I also know we have to do a water main over there in the next year or two. So we did half of the road, we paved it. We're gonna do the water main on the other half in the next year or two, and then we'll come back and pave the rest of the road. So that's clean. So that's part of, making sure we're not wasting money as we move through this process. But it's something, we can work on getting an update and having a 3-year pavement plan together, so that people are aware of where we're going with these roads, and it's discussed, through the CIP. We can discuss it through the CIP process too.
Cool, thank you.
Any other thoughts about process?
Bill, I
I think,
would only add one thing, Bill.
go
I would say that the process needs to be broken into 2 components, and I think Chris alluded to this. One component, which is your normal operating cost, the trucks, the mowers, the buses, that type of thing. That has to happen on an annual basis, or we dig ourselves a big hole real quick. We saw that with the buses and what that creates as a problem. So that is one phase, which is, I think, a little easier. I think we have 5-year plans for most of our departments that kind of phase that out. The second thing are the 4 or 5 items that you mentioned earlier, and prioritizing those as to when the debt schedule allows those to start fitting in. But in order to prioritize them, you also have to know what the values are. So, creating a value for the Taylor, creating a value for the substation, creating a value for the DPW that's realistic, having the value for the senior center and recreational center, so that everybody really knows what we're going towards, how much that is, and which projects you could take on as the debt starts to drop off, which is not that far out. As I said, you're literally talking about 2 years in which you'd be starting any one of those projects. So, and there's a lot of work to do between now and then. So I think I'd break it into those two components and then prioritize that way.
Okay.
Because the other thing that we have to think
I think
about,
that's a
like
good
our
thought.
technology
Yeah, go ahead.
expenses, were with CIP, where we've had that largely in all of the devices, where we went K to 12, one-to-one at once.
Yeah, I think we have, along those same lines, we have what really are operating expenses being funded through capital. And then we have our large-scale renovation or reconstruction or new construction projects. And they even get broken out that way as we submit them through ClearGov now. There's a different category for whether it's, an annual thing, a vehicle, and we know we have our fleet. I have a 20-year replacement plan on the fleet, just based on standard, 10-year replacement, 12-year, 20-year replacement. So, those are all things we can push every single year. We know what those should be and figure out what our capital costs should be on those really operating costs. And then what these, like Bill said, split them out so it's a separate kind of expense that really you look at when these other debt starts to drop off, that's when you can start to plug those other buildings into play, really, because they're, right now we have 4 buildings that we're looking at.
I think one of the things that we did even with the police department, we actually included those right in the budget now because we got to the point where we realized that every year we have to replace so many. It's almost the same thing with the buses. But we're almost at the point where we should really think about including them right in the operating budget itself. And then figure out, and then we deal with the other items beyond that. But I think those are really clear operating things. I think same thing almost with the MIS stuff, which is we do that every single year. We put so much money into the MIS plan because we have to replace computers every year. Otherwise, we get hit with a very huge replacement cost, which really is unaffordable in many ways. So I think we should do that every year, obviously. But these are annual operating costs that we have to deal with. And the question is, what's the best way to deal with that, and how, and can the operating budget absorb that in a way that makes sense too? So I think those are long-term strategic discussions that really have to be considered, and what's the best way to pay for them.
Well, I think that goes to what our definitions are for what goes through CIP and capital as a capital project, and what goes in as a capital outlay in the operating budget. The capital outlay, which the police department does, the expectation is that those vehicles are not around for more than 5 years. And that's, the definition. I think it's $25,000 or more, and it's going to be here for more than 5 years. So, they're turning those over. Their frontline vehicles are off that front line after 3 years because they've got 100,000 miles and who knows how many hours on the engine. So that's how, the chief is able to fit those into his operating budget. So maybe that's part of the conversation is, what, if that's going to change, what needs to change on the back end, on the bylaw side or the code side to make that effective.
And the other thing too is that some of the larger vehicles, like your $100,000 vehicles, that we put aside so much money per year just so that we ease into those expenses as opposed to just paying $100,000 at a time. How much? Buses are costing us how much, Bill Yukna, per year?
77 passenger bus is about 86,000 right now.
Right.
And
so there you go. So
we replace 2 of those a year. So, but I think the problem is trying to put money away. We can't cover our current expenses, so we don't have the money to put away towards future capital expenditures at this point. So again, I think it's still prioritizing what we need, and DPW's needs are just as great as the schools, if not greater in a lot of cases because of the cost of some of their equipment. I mean, they could buy one truck that costs what our 2 buses cost, so
Right.
I think that has to be taken into account.
Phil,
Right.
the buses go on to CIP?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to
Yes.
Chris makes the perfect point.
Because of the,
Because of the years. Our buses typically will last 8 to 10 years, depending on, usage. So just like Chris's trucks that can last, much more than 5 years, in most cases, that's where the bylaw basically says if it's 5 years or under, you can kind of go this direction with it. But if it's over that, and it's a dollar value over that, then you're going into the CIP process.
Yeah.
So,
and same thing too, if you don't do that, 1 year, you're just gonna go whacked and say, we need 4 buses this year. So it's better to keep the fleet going
and
with a
again,
certain schedule.
for us, the defense is quite honestly, and has been true for the time I've been here, is that it cost us less to run our own fleet than it cost us if we had to contract out. And we can prove that every time because there's contracts out there with every town around us who doesn't run a fleet. We could never have operated through the pandemic because we had total control over the buses and our own staffing, where most towns didn't. And they couldn't have done what we did with our elementary schools and things like that. So there's some huge advantages. But the biggest one, quite honestly, is financial. It's cost us less to do what we do. Even when you add on the DPW, maintaining our buses and going through the whole process, it's still a much better deal for the town than it would be if I contracted out with Connolly or one of the other big bus companies.
Right. Okay. So I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think when now what we do is we put this stuff on paper and then we start talking about, where the priorities are. Because, and their priorities in different directions and different levels. Because we're looking at capital building as well as operational capital needs, and then infrastructure capital needs as well. So, and it's tied balancing all of them in any one year based upon the level of revenue coming in. But that's why we take a look at the revenue side too, and then see when's the opportunity for us to start addressing some of these big capital needs. Like I said, if I agree with Bill 100% that we're the recipients of a good stock market, but the reality is that we're a lot closer than where we were in terms of addressing some of those things. But that could change in any one given year. But so far, it's been a pretty good run, and hopefully it'll continue. But we're hopeful that if we get to that point, and that goal line's getting closer than we thought. So it's good to be able to start including those things in the long-term planning of our capital picture.
Bill, there's one other question.
Go ahead.
There's one other question, and that is on the money that's potentially coming from the federal government for infrastructure.
Yes.
How does that play into potentially our capital budget? Because that could be the godsend in a lot of ways to give us that leg up. And I don't know if you've gotten any more clarity on that.
We're still waiting for clarity, and in fact, I had a conversation today with the director of the MMA about that this afternoon, about that very topic, and they are getting closer to a determination on what the final rules and regulations are. But his guidance to me was to stay the course that we're on right now, which is to do not a lot of anything until we have clarification. But that should be coming forth within the next 30 days, based on what I've been told. We just got a letter that was signed by the entire Massachusetts delegation, including all our congressmen and senators, that was sent to Secretary Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury Yellen, who to give them the indication of the kind of concerns that we have here in Massachusetts. Particularly the offset of the SBA money against our operating our revenue deficit that we identified quite clearly. And very clearly, when compared to other places where we lost stadium revenues, and we lost meals and hotel tax, and all the different components of that based on the pandemic. So I think we have a pretty clear picture compared to most places. But when they inserted the money from the debt service into against that revenue loss, we ended up with a net gain on paper, which is clearly not the case. So I think. Once we have that clarification, which we think has a fighting chance at this point, I think we'll have a better position to addressing those things. Now, having said that, if none of that comes to fruition, there are things that we can do under the current regulations which could help some of those situations. I mean, particularly, Bill and I talked about the possibility of using some of that money for some of the chillers at the middle school to address that need instead of using free cash. I think that's a legitimate use of that money. I also think that we can address some of the dam issues with that money, as well as some of the stormwater issues that we've identified. So I think there are some legitimate uses that we can go with, but I'd be reluctant to go in those directions until we have a better understanding of where the money is going to be spent, how it can be spent, and then we can start making some decisions accordingly. But I do think you're right, Bill. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that is a component of our capital planning at this point too.
That way we don't end up like Methuen that spent it, now they gotta pay it back.
Right, and it's interesting about that one. That was actually that was the first wave of COVID money that they spent it on not even the ARPA money, and they pushed back on that. And I think, and looking back on that, apparently what had happened was they'd gotten guidance on that, and then they changed the guidance on them. So we've even seen that in some of the FEMA money at some points where they've said yes to things and then turn around later and said no. So we just have to be very careful and diligent, in which I think Marie's done a great job of doing that and checking all those regulations. And we've retained the services of Clifton Larkin to advise us on the federal money as well, to make sure that we're in a position so we can spend it correctly. But that's a challenge, because it's a bit of the goal line seems to move every week on those regulations. And the last thing we want to be in is in a clawback situation where we lose the money and have to pay it back. So we're just moving very, very carefully but diligently in the process to make sure we can use that as a potential offset from some of our overall capital needs. I do think, frankly, there's a good argument that can be made that we could use some of that money for, even the transportation money, that new transportation bill that's been passed at the federal level on the infrastructure bill. We may see some money on money for roads and sidewalks. We may see some of that filter down to us on the local level. So we may get some additional money to assist with the Chapter 90 of it. So that's, there's more to come on that front, but that's already passed. And now it's a question of, what comes out of that, where when the money gets to us. So as another possible resource. So anything else that people want to, the members of the committee want to talk about at this point? I did want to get this on the table for discussion, for initial discussion. I think what I'd like to do is have another meeting, even prior to the meeting in March, to talk about, and provide you with a listing of all the projects that we talked about tonight, and maybe we'll come up with a process where we can start identifying and prioritizing those things. I think that's true capital planning, strategic planning, which is really the role of this committee as well, and not just meeting once annually to go through the list. I think we really should be taking those steps accordingly. So, any further thoughts or comments from the committee? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
There are a few people in the audience, Bill.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know if you want to turn it over and let them speak their piece.
Sure, absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't see him. I'm at a disadvantage here to see if anybody was, if somebody wanted to come forward and speak. I'm certainly open to that.
Don't make me use the mic.
Yep, you got it.
Good afternoon. For those that don't know me, I'm Robert Bodie of Carmine Avenue. I'm speaking for a number of members from the seniors age group. We're being tired of being told that there's no room at the senior center for an event that we want to go to. We're tired of seeing Mark Craig out parking cars on the grass, so that when we do get to go to an event, that we find parking very difficult. And also, they'll tell us, the able-bodied ones, please go up to CVS or around the corner, because there's just no parking here. We're tired of all right, now I get to go to an event. Who did I make stay home? Because there's just no room for everybody. So we need something going for the community center. And I would like to know, roughly how many seniors are in town. That I know Mark keeps records of who uses the center, but how many more could be using it if there were room for us? So, and I know a lot of the seniors do a lot of volunteering for the town. I think now is about time for some of the payback to be coming back to the seniors for a new community center for not only the seniors, but the veterans agents and all of the other functions that are going into the new building. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else?
We got one more, Bill.
Sure. Okay.
My name is Paul Dumas, 4 Adam Street, and in 2022 I'll be a resident and taxpayer for 50 years. And I echo some of the concerns that Bob has. There's a ad hoc committee with COA members, there's a selectman on it. I'm a member of the Friends of Foxborough Seniors, it's a 501c3. We do some financial support at the senior center, quite a bit actually. There's people, I haven't been in public life quite a bit. I don't know how many years I've been on different committees in town, but I can remember my first committee, I think it was a school committee in the 80s. And one thing that always troubled me, even though I'm a senior now, is when I was on the school committee in the 80s, there was a lot of concern about adolescents in the community. No place for them after school and stuff. And particularly as our culture has changed, and these young folks are dealing with more challenges than anybody here had to deal with. That's a component of this community center concept that's very important to get something going there. And there's a recreation member, somebody from the recreation board is on this ad hoc committee. So this thing's got to get in the queue. I was happy to hear, Bill mentioned and the other Bill reiterated the number of facility type things that you needed. Okay, I've been around long enough to know, and I saw when I was on the school committee, the seniors get bounced all over town. And there was a Band-Aid approach when they built the current facility. It was a quick thing, and there was a lot of fundraising involved for some of the extraneous things to come with that. But you get seniors, I don't complain, I've never complained about paying taxes, but there's a lot of seniors that are paying $4,000 or $5,000, and they've been doing it for a long time, and they don't get a return personally. And there's no question that I have not gone into the senior center a few times because I could see the parking lot. I went in and I turned around and came out. So, the building itself is inadequate. Okay, they could do more. Other towns around, Franklin, Walpole, I've been in the Franklin facility, haven't been in the Walpole. Those have happened recently, and I see in the Boston papers that various other towns are coming up with a price tag for, a senior center. But I think that the community center is a far better concept. So you have to see some of us showing up at these meetings, to make sure that the seniors are not forgotten and that the teenagers aren't forgotten. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Paul. So I think I appreciate the comments that folks are making about this and advocating for their individual projects. I think
Bill, there's one more.
we're going to have further conversation about those later on, but go ahead. You're going to say, Bill?
There's one more.
Is there further? No, sure, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Carol Bodie, Bob's wife. And we have lived here since 1961. And we've raised our 3 children here, and they went to our schools, and 2 of our grandchildren went to our schools here in Foxborough. And we, the tax-paying senior citizens of Foxborough, deserve a larger facility for our various activities. And the staff deserve a larger space, because whenever there's an activity over there where a lot of people attend, they have to move movable walls and furniture to accommodate all of the seniors who wish to attend. Recently, Bob and I attended a lecture where the speaker used a video to enhance his lecture. And because of the shape and size of the room, and because where our chairs were located, we couldn't even see the screen. Have you been in the senior center? Have you seen how they have to move the furniture and the walls? Fortunately, the movable walls, but whatever. So, we definitely need a bigger facility. And the one that's proposed will be a community center, as you well know, so that other people, age groups, and interests can also use the same facility. I mean, have you ever had to move furniture and walls in your jobs? I didn't. I worked in the schools. I didn't have to do that. All I had to do was erase the mistakes I made on this typewriter. That was long before computers. So I urge you to all consider. I know it's on the books. Will it happen in my lifetime? Probably not. But please, think about it hard and really consider how many more people can use the facilities. If you build one, I know there's 3 different places that the committee, whichever committee is that's considering this, have chosen. From the people that I've spoken to at the senior center, have one particular place they would like to use the facility, the auditorium at the old hospital, or the new one, and take the old building down, which is going to have to come down anyway, and put it there in that spot. That's the really best place of the people I've spoken to, I think. So please put this on the agenda, maybe in my lifetime. Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you. Anyone else that want to say something right now?
Yep, there's one more.
My name is Helen Olson. I live at 31 Burrows Road. I've been a resident of Foxborough for over 50 years and raised my kids here, paid for all the schools, all the improvements and everything, and I have 3 points to make. Land is available. There is one parcel that is ready to build on. Other 2 have to have things torn down, okay? Second one is the cost. It's just going to keep rising. Third one is we are getting people from all the other towns around us who are coming into our facility because we're open. We are having classes, and it's a wonderful thing to have them come, and they are supporting us, and they are just great people. And this is wonderful. We're a welcoming community, and it is great to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that Foxborough is a victim of its own success in many ways, because the programs are very popular, and that we are open in comparison to a lot of other communities. And so I agree with the comments that we are getting quite a few people there because the programs are good, and that because we're offering them when a lot of places aren't. So I appreciate those thoughts. So I think, all those comments are fair comments to make, and I think that they're certainly supportive of the community center concept. I think this is a little bit premature in terms of, advocating for an individual project. I think what we're trying to do at this point is identify all the projects first, and then once we get down to the discussion phase of application for each one and identifying the pros and cons of each one, that's probably the best time to hear from others as well. But listen, I get the understanding and I appreciate the advocation for projects that people really want to see, and it's good to hear that people really are supportive of those concepts as well. So with that, we will identify all the projects that I just wanted to make sure if there are other projects out there that we haven't considered. I think these are the key operating departments that we referred from. I certainly will reach out to police and fire as well, because they're some of the two other big departments that we will probably hear from. But I do think that we want to make sure we identify those items and make sure we clearly have created some sort of a plan, a long-term plan, 5, 10, 15, 20-year plan if we want. Identifying these projects and knowing that they're all fit in at some point, knowing full well that priorities may change along the way, given the circumstances that present them, that it could present to the town on an ongoing basis. So with that, I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn, and then we'll come back with another date for a meeting to talk about all the projects that we've identified and the prioritization process that we'll use to put them on the schedule. All right.
I'll make a
So
motion to
entertain a
adjourn.
motion.
I'll second it.
Right. All right. All those in favor, and I'll start with Chris.
Aye.
Amy, aye.
Amy,
Stephanie, aye.
Stephanie, and Paul.
Aye.
All right. And I, the chair votes yes, and this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.